Namagurubhyo namaha Eshoyaragha Om Shri Arvindaya namaha.
Words of our Divine Mother from the collective works of our Divine Mother, Volume 14, Topic Surrender. Surrender to the Divine Will. Our Divine Mother says, surrender is the decision taken to hand over the responsibility of your life to the Divine. This is done either through the mind or the emotion or the life impulse or through all of them together. Our Divine Mother says, to surrender to the Divine is to renounce your narrow limits and let yourself be invaded by it and make a center for its play. If you are truly surrendered to the Divine in the right manner and totally, then at every moment you will be what you ought to be. You will do what you ought to do. You will know what you ought to know. But for that, you should have transcended all the limitations of the ego. Our Divine Mother says, true surrender enlarges you. It increases your capacity. It gives you a greater measure in quality and in quantity, which you could not have had yourself. Detailed surrender, a surrender which does not forget anything. Detailed surrender means the surrender of all the details of life, even the smallest and the most insignificant in appearance. And this means to remember the Divine in all circumstances. Whatever we think, feel or do, we must do it for Him as a way of coming close to Him, to be more and more what He wants us to be, capable of manifesting His will in perfect sincerity and purity, to be instruments of His love. Our Divine Mother says, if man surrenders totally to the Divine, he identifies himself with the Divine. Perfect surrender, the indispensable condition for identification. In the integrality and absoluteness of bhakti and surrender, we find the essential condition of perfect peace leading to uninterrupted bliss. The path is long, but self-surrender makes it short. The will is difficult, the way is difficult, but perfect trust makes it easy. Surrender to the Divine is the best emotional protection. The true repose is that of a perfect surrender to the Divine. Question, sweet Mother, what is the secret of success in sadhana? Our Divine Mother says, surrender. Next subtopic, to will what the Divine wills. Our Divine Mother says, surrender is the will. To will what the Divine wills is the supreme wisdom. To will what God wills, that is the supreme secret. Will one with the Divine will, a condition that triumphs over all obstacles. Divine will, the will expressing the highest truth. Let us do our best in all circumstances, leaving the result to the Divine's decision. We must be satisfied with what the Divine gives us and do what He wants us to do without weakness, free from useless ambition. When there is any difficulty, we must always remember that we are here exclusively to accomplish the Divine's will. And when her adhesion to the Divine's will is total, then also our peace and joy becomes total. Our Divine Mother says the Divine's will is that we should be like channels, always open, always move wide, so that His forces may pour their abundance into the mouth. Our will must always be a perfect expression of the Divine's will. Our constant prayer is to understand the Divine's will and to live accordingly. We must lie before the divine, always like a page perfectly blank, so that the divine's will may be inscribed in us without any difficulty or mixture. Our Divine Mother says, at each moment, may our attitude be such that the divine's will determine our choice, so that the divine may give the direction to all our life. We must see only through the divine's eyes and act only through the divine's will. We must know how to depend for everything and in everything on the divine. He alone can surmount all difficulties. In a total surrender to the divine, there can be no longer any errors or faults or any insufficiency, since it is what the divine has willed that he does, and it is done as the divine has willed it. Always the supreme will remains the eternal mystery, calling for all our wonder and marveling. Like the child who does not reason and has no care, we trust ourselves to the divine, that the divine's will may be done. To do at each moment the best we can and leave the result to the divine's decision is the surest way to peace, happiness, strength, progress, and final perfection. Our Divine Mother says, the only thing you have to do is to remain quiet, undisturbed, solely turn towards the divine. The rest is in His hands. One of the main problems of the present world is that of the population increasing enormously in the last 100 years. How many souls evolved in such a short time? What will be the destiny of the world in regard to the population? Will the numbers go on increasing with the current speed, or will there be a certain deep period, a drop without any artificial means? In case the population decreases in the future, what will be the fate of so many souls that have evolved so far? These are the questions of a sadhak to our Divine Mother, and for that our Divine Mother says, there is a supreme consciousness that governs the manifestation. His wisdom is certainly much greater than ours, so we need not have to bother about what will happen. Blessings. Our Divine Mother says the Lord is always victorious in His own way, not in the human way, according to His own will, not according to the will of men. The Lord is always present, only we do not realize it. We are always free to make our proposals to the Divine Lord, but after all, it is only His will that is realized. If one looks from high enough, whatever one does, one never wastes one's time, since one acts according to one's nature and without knowing it according to the will of the Lord. Our Divine Mother says, be quiet and offer yourself calmly and confidently. All that happens is always the effect of the Supreme's will. Human action can be the occasion but never the cause. Difficulties of surrender is the next topic. Our Divine Mother says it is rare that somebody can surrender entirely to the Divine's will without having to face one or another of the difficulties. How many efforts and struggles again to give ourselves to surrender once the individuality is constituted. For if the struggle is not an actual one, that does not mean that it will not come one day in one form or another. For always, at least once in our life, we placed in some circumstance to test whether we are ready for an entire surrender to the divine will, whether we are before all human beings striving to attain and manifest the Godhead, ready to renounce everything in the world, what seems to us good as well as what seems bad, for that supreme conquest, in that ascent towards the heights, both virtues and duties, that is to say, our mental prejudices and preferences, stand far more in our way than our exterior weaknesses and faults. An error can always be used as a springboard, whilst a virtue is more often a limit, a barrier that must be surmounted. Our Divine Mother says, I will add, quoting a passage of the Synthesis of Yoga, All these are within us, waiting to wall in the spirit with forms. But we must always go beyond, always renounce the lesser for the greater, the finite for the infinite. We must be prepared to proceed from illumination to illumination, from experience to experience, from soul state to soul state, so as to reach the utmost transcendence of the divine and its utmost universality. The way in which most people surrender, let God manifest His will, but let it be the same as mine. One thing you must know and decide. It is if you want the true divine as He is, or if you want the divine in keeping with your own conception of what He ought to be. And if you have decided to surrender sincerely and totally to the divine, to be and do what He wants you to be, and to do according to His own will, or if you want the divine to do what you want Him to do and act according to your own will. Our Divine Mother says, I have forwarded your prayer to the Supreme Lord. But if you want to live in Ananda, you must not try to impose your will on the divine, but on the contrary, you must be ready to accept all that comes to you from Him with an equal peace, because He knows better than we what is good for our progress. Our Divine Mother says the time has come to rely only on the divine will and to let it work freely through you. I repeat, the time has come at last not to rely anymore on one's own petty will, to hand over the whole affair to the divine's will and let it do its work through you, not only your mind and feelings but mainly through the body. And if you do it sincerely, all this body nonsense will disappear and you will be stronger and fit for your work. When men will understand that the divine knows better than they do what is the best for them, many of their difficulties will disappear. If the Lord wills for you a hardship, do not protest. Take it as a blessing, and indeed it will become so. The Lord is not an all-powerful automation that human beings can move by the push button of their will, and yet most of those who surrender to God expect that from Him. These are the words of our Divine Mother.